They ran out of tomatoes last week. Look out. All right. So we are continuing in Matthew chapter 5.
Okay.
If you are under 2 feet tall, you are dismissed. You have to be at least 40 inches or taller to listen to the sermon. I'm telling you here. We've been in the Sermon on the Mount church for the last month and a half, and here Jesus lays the groundwork, revealing not only who he is, but what he expects of us. And so far we've looked at our attitude as Christians, and what our attitude should be toward things like ourselves, things like sin, things like the world, God himself. And so far we've looked at what Jesus had to say regarding even the Old Testament law. And is it outdated, or what part of it, what is it is good? And Jesus actually goes further than the law and says not only should you not commit it, you shouldn't even think about it in your mind, because if you've already thought it, you've already committed it. And it just further exposed the need of salvation. Yeah. And then we looked at anger, and we thought, well, that's a tough message to get through. And nobody punched any walls, so we got through it, right? But an important message nonetheless, because there was such a thing, and there is such a thing as righteous anger. But what does that look like? And so we looked at that, and as that wasn't tough enough, Jesus had a lot to say about adultery. He had a lot to say about being faithful to your spouse, and his thoughts on divorce. And I'm so thankful that's not this week. Last week, we looked at some tools that God gives us and how we can quickly turn them into weapons. And so we look at God's greatest tools and man's most dangerous weapons are often the same thing. And we looked at things like the tongue and how, sometimes it's not, a firing weapon. It's your own tongue that can do more damage than anything else. But it's also something that God has given us as an ability to proclaim his message. So what you do with it, it either becomes a weapon or a tool. And so this message, this message is hard today for me. I miss my dad, and I knew this one was coming. But today's message, I simply titled "Like Father, Like Son," and I have so many things in common with my dad. When I was younger, especially when I started out preaching, I wanted to be the opposite, right? It was like this slur to say, like, wow, you preach just like him, or you sound like him, or you look like him, and you walk like him, and all those things. And I tried to run from that for so many years until, I don't know what age it was. It's amazing the older you get, the smarter your parents are. They're stupid when you're a teenager. And then you get older, you're like, oh, you were right about everything. And so it's kind of interesting how that works out. I guess I'm the only one in that boat. But nonetheless, there are so many habits, even, and interests that he had that I have. And so much of that is because I wanted to emulate him. So there's that part of you as a little boy, a little girl that, if Dad liked baseball, I like baseball. And Dad didn't understand soccer, and Zach doesn't understand soccer. Dad let me try soccer, and then after I got kicked and hit in the head, I was like, I don't understand why I'm doing it. And so we have the same and similar interests. We also have the same habits. The things that drive my mom insane are the things that drive Megan insane about me. And so, and it makes me kind of laugh when she says, I hate it when you do this. And I'm like, I kind of laugh when my mom always said that about my dad. And I know that I will likely come across situations and I will handle them the way he would have, or the way he actually did. And as children, we want to imitate our heroes. We'll sing, we'll walk, we'll talk like them naturally. I grew up listening with my parents. I talked about this a lot. And my parents listened to like Southern gospel music was the only music that ever existed on the face of the earth. And then my sister, she was the crazy one, and she listened to country music. And so that was like my only escape to, four men in suits. And so it was like, then, they tell Zach to get up there and sing. And so how do I sing? I sing like I'm from Alabama or something weird. And I don't know how else to do it, because that's what I imitated. And so sometimes the imitation, it comes naturally. It's not even I'm trying to make it, do this poor impression of something. It's we imitate what we know. And when we don't know anything else, we go to what's safe. Well, this is what this person did, and I thought it was effective, and it made sense to me. And this is how they sang, and this is how they interpreted those words, and this is how I'm going to do it. And it doesn't go away as adults. We think that just as kids, we're only as kids do we, imitate. I got sent to the children's or the principal's office a few times in elementary school because Power Rangers was the thing. And it's really cool to watch it on TV, but when you roundhouse kick a kid, that's highly frowned upon in first grade. And so I have a problem there, but I don't do that now, mostly because I can't get my leg up that high. But so some things do go away. But even as adults, when we don't really know what to do, we begin to do the thing that mom or dad did. We begin to do, even if we don't have all the love and respect and, they are my hero, you can find your parent to be the most deplorable person. And yet, you'll do what they did, and that's a struggle. Right? Because I talk about all the things I do like my dad, and we talk about tongue in cheek, but there's things that my dad did that I probably shouldn't do. And I do. Because, again, we imitate what we know. And so, with that being said, we look at Matthew chapter 5 today, and beginning in verse 43, the ESV says, "You have heard," this is Jesus saying, "the law says, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you. In that way, you will be acting as true children of your Father in heaven. For he gives his sunlight to both the evil and the good. And he sends the rain on the just and the unjust alike. If you love only those who love you, what reward is there for that? Even corrupt tax collectors do that much." In verse 47 it says, "If you are kind only to your friends, how are you different from anyone else? Even pagans do that." Verse 48 says, "But you are to be perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect." You see, the Pharisees, as I talked about a few weeks ago, the hypocritical conservatives of their time, the Pharisees were not obeying the Old Testament law, they were evading it. Love your neighbor, the Jew, but hate your enemy, the Gentile. See, Jesus is quoting what they believe to be the law, and it's not even the law. The law doesn't say to love your neighbor and hate your enemy, but the Pharisees had twisted the law. And so Jesus says, "You have heard it," says it. You understand, he doesn't say, "It is written." He says, "You've heard it said to love your enemy," or to love your neighbor, to hate your enemy. And that's a nice pill to swallow. That's easy to, it's easy to love people who love you back, and it's quite frankly a lot easier to hate the people that hate you, right? At least in our minds, we think it's just easier to do it that way. And the early church didn't follow that tradition. Had the early church followed this tradition of the law, you and I wouldn't know about Christ today. But suddenly the Jewish church woke up and realized that this gospel message is for the world. And so God so loved the world, not just your neighbor, but he loved everyone. And so as a result, the Jews brought this message to the Gentile world so that you and I could accept and believe. And Jesus comes in and obliterates their so-called theology by saying that they must love their enemies as well. And so naturally, such a radical thought brings up a lot of questions. Brings up a lot of questions. And we're going to look at 3 of them this morning very quickly. And the first one is, who's my enemy? When Jesus says you got to love your enemy, well, okay, just who exactly is my enemy? To say Christians don't have enemies, you're not reading your Bible. So, the preacher that says, you shouldn't have enemies as a Christian, that doesn't make sense. We have enemies. Jesus, Peter, Paul, all had enemies. All of them dead as a result of enemies. We are persecuted for Jesus' sake, for the sake of His name, and few of us have truly faced persecution because Christianity, for some now, is more of a fad. Christianity is something that you can pick up and take off like a scarf. And so it's not necessarily something that we see a lot of today, but our enemies come not because we declare war. And this is where the defining of what an enemy is. A Christian enemy is not an enemy because we made them that way, but because they declared war on what we believe and stand for. People are going to be abrasive. They're going to be critical. They're going to wish harm on you or apathy toward your success. Your enemy is not another child of God. That's the point, and one of the things that you need to understand when you read Matthew 5, and Jesus is talking. He's talking to his believers, and he says, love your enemies. He's not saying, love the guy sitting behind you. That guy you should already love. That's a given. That's another child of God. He's going to touch on that more in Matthew 18. Because there's another way to go about that if you don't love the person sitting next to you or behind you. But the Matthew 5, this enemy, this isn't a fellow believer. This is a non-believer. And so if you struggle with loving believers, then wait on Matthew 5 first. Because you need to love believers. That should be the easy part. Isn't that crazy? Loving the people in this room ought to be the easy thing. I got work to do. Yeah, probably all of us do. Because it's hard to love everybody all the time. But in this, he says, if you... well, I'm getting ahead of myself. He says, your enemy is not another child of God, and that is its own set of rules, because you should never have an enemy with another fellow believer. Why? Because if we don't set the boundaries of you are now an enemy, then, and both of us believe in the same God and the same Christ who came and saved and died for us, then how do we ever declare the one is the enemy of the other? The non-believer is the one that declares that you're an enemy now. Because I don't believe in what you're doing. I don't believe in it. And so, there will be people who will curse you, revile you. They'll think what you're doing today is stupid. That's the unbeliever that Jesus is talking about. It's a beautiful day. Why aren't you at the beach? It's a beautiful day. Why aren't you at Disney? It's a beautiful day. Why didn't you sleep in? Why are you here? This is a waste of time. That person, right? I don't declare war on them because they chose not to come. But they declare war on me because they chose to be here. There's a difference, child of God, and you need to understand that. Because too many of us sit in this pew like it's a throne. And we think, I'm here, where are they? And we declare war on the very people that Jesus called us to love. He said, love your enemies. Because they're not your enemies, you're theirs. And so why would you spend all of this time talking about all the things you're doing right, all the things they're doing wrong, when the very essence of you talking about what you're doing right is wrong? Because let's face it, the only righteousness that any of us have is by Christ alone. I have no room to brag about any right decision I've made, any good thing I've done. It's been because of Him. And so we're talking about believer and non-believer. You have one person going one direction and another person going another direction, which causes abrasion, causes separation. There is a strain there. And if we don't have enemies, we have a problem in our Christian life. If you don't have people that have an issue with what you're doing, then maybe what you're doing isn't being bold enough. Because Christianity, at the end of the day, in a loving way, it is confrontational. Jesus, in week 1 of our series, He called Christianity the salt of the earth. And we're like, hey man, I'm the salt. And we go get it tattooed on our leg. I'm the salt. And we don't even know what that means. Because what is salt to a wound? I don't like it. Right? You ever have that? You got a cut on the foot. You're like, let's go to the beach. You take a step in the water and you say a 4-letter word you shouldn't say. It burns. Doesn't feel good. But salt, it helps heal the wound. So as much as you don't like it, it's actually helping you. Salt isn't just a seasoning, it's a healing compound. And so Jesus in week 1 calls us the salt. So we shouldn't be surprised when the wound responds to the salt. When the world that is broken responds, ouch, that hurt. Yeah. But his message is here to heal, not make it worse. And so if you're going around with the gospel and you're just a finger pointing into the wound, that's not the gospel message. We are peacemakers. We're not warmongers. And so we declare that over a war-hungry world. And that doesn't make sense. We want confrontation today. We got a lot of keyboard warriors out there today. Man, they're really quick to spit off something nasty on whatever social media site you want to use. And at the end of the day, we are to be peacemakers in a war-hungry world. Not be so hungry to get comments and likes just by saying something crude and offensive. And so, how should we love? How should we love this enemy? Christian love is an act of the will, not a feeling. Christian love doesn't mean that I feel a certain way, but I'm called to act a certain way. God is kind, He is patient, He is forgiving. We are to be the same. Would be standing here if it wasn't for God's people being patient, kind, and forgiving. There is power in those words because it gives people opportunity to service. When you are not patient, when you are not kind, when you are not forgiving, it buries people. Love does not mean that we like things that people we do. I need to figure out how to read. Love does not mean we like things people do that we disagree with. That, my essence in loving you is I'm just going to like everything that you're doing and I'm going to cheer it on. When the world speaks evil of us, we ought to be speaking good of them. How you respond to your dislike defines the way that you love. Christians are some of the best people at being passive aggressive. Right? Oh, I see you're having another drink of alcohol. Right? And we can go down that Leviticus road. Or just love them. Doesn't mean that I have to grab a bottle of whiskey with them. But at the same time, we need to love people. And not point out the mistake and hope that they make 2 and 2 together. And then when they decide to declare war, you're like, well, I didn't have anything to do with it. I handed them the gun, pointed the target at my head and said, shoot. But I don't know why they shot fire. When the world speaks evil of us, we speak good of them. Man, that's fun. You like when people talk about you? I love it. It's a great time. And when someone says, in your response, what do you say back? Well, I think they're blank. If at this point you still don't know who your enemy is, when it comes to loving someone, who is a person you would hate for me to mention? That's what we're talking about. Because sometimes when we talk about enemies, we think of like this faceless person in La Habra that I don't know, and so then there's no personal connection here. But when I say, you gotta love somebody, think of like the last person you would want me to mention. His name is Steve. And you're like, please don't mention Steve. If you mention Steve right now, I'm gonna lose my mind. And I'm like, you gotta love Steve. And you're like, God, I don't wanna love Steve. That's who you gotta love. You gotta love. It's not a choice. It's not an opportunity. God has commanded you to love the person He doesn't want you to mention. Because the moment you mention it, now the responsibility's out there. I made a comment, and I thought about it later, and I thought nobody's going to be able to see it. Yeah, nobody's going to be able to see it. But this is literally what the disciples are doing. Jesus, just who Who do you think we're supposed to love anyway? What enemies are you talking about? I'm talking about the ones you don't want me to mention. Let's start there. Because for some reason, we seem to think that as long as he doesn't say it by name, then I guess he doesn't really know me, and I can have an excuse as to why I don't need to love said person. And you know. In your heart of hearts, you know. You know that you're supposed to love them. You know that you're supposed to love your family. Yeah, they're annoying sometimes. Mine isn't. They're all perfect. But your families, I'm sure, are a mess. Mine isn't. We've got it all figured out. But you gotta love them. Because I'm gonna tell you right now, when you do something that the world's like, I don't like that, and it goes dark, the one person that can turn the light on is family. And when you turn the light out on family because you don't like the way that they're operating their life, oh my goodness, what do we do? Do I agree with everything that my family is doing? Absolutely not. That's absurd to even suggest. I pray for members of my family constantly. Not because I'm right and they're wrong, but because I know that there are certain things that are going on in their life, and if they continue down that path, it's going to lead them to nowhere. And why do I want to sit back with popcorn and enjoy? Sometimes the very enemy is the people that God has brought into our life that we should be naturally loving. And we aren't. So, we need to respond evil with good. We looked at that a little bit last week. Today we have a generation that waits for you to respect them before they give you an ounce of respect. Right? I could trample on that one way too long. But I heard it said a lot at Chick-fil-A. Why did you think it was appropriate for you to use that kind of language to a customer? You were supposed to respect the customer. Well, they came at me. So why do I need to respect them? They're supposed to respect me. What? That is not the definition of hospitality. This mentality responds evil with evil. If you're mean to me, I'm going to be mean to you back. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to be better at it than you are. It becomes this competition. And really, you think it's about a mean competition, but it's a stupid competition. Let's see who can be dumber than the other. Because it's a maturity thing. You're going to say something hurtful to me, I'm going to say something hurtful to you. And what is absurd is it's not always the person that is at Chick-fil-A that we're talking about. We're talking about our spouse. We're talking about our children. We're talking about our neighbors, our church members. And we say things that we don't even mean, and we're just spouting it off because we're in this competition to see who can be evil, more evil than the other. Why? This isn't God's plan for you. And he's made that evident in this chapter. Too many of us are filled with hostility, and we need to be filled with hospitality. We're just waiting for the fight. We're waiting for our kids to say something weird, and then we just, bah! And it's like, the kid's like, I just walked in the room. I don't even know what's happening. Right? We're just wanting somebody to say something sideways at us at church so they can give us an excuse not to come back next week. We're waiting for an excuse to have an enemy when God has given you every reason to have a brother. And we miss the opportunity. Responding evil with good requires faith. It doesn't require being a nice person, a good person. And let me get you on a training set program so that you can understand what it's like to be nice. I'm sure there's courses out there for that, but I think the most effective thing that you can have is Christ in your heart. If you are finding yourself being mean 90% of the time, it might be because you don't have Christ in your life 90% of the day. It's hard in the flesh to love, to respond evil with good. My wife has mastered this subject. Drives me nuts. She's perfect. Stuff's gross. But every time I have a bad day and she sees I'm being short, she knows it. And so instead of saying, well, you've had a day, you had to counsel somebody, well, you should hear what your daughter did today. And I'm sure it's a great one, but she's adventurous. But my wife masters this art of not responding evil with good. And what does it do for me? Humbles me to realize that I came at her with evil. What am I doing? If Christ is our Savior, and And God is our Heavenly Father, and we ought to have traits of our Father. My dad had a stepdad that not a lot of people knew about. In fact, I didn't even know about it until he died. I was young, I was only 13 when he passed, but my dad had a stepdad, and he still had traits of him. He became my dad's dad when my dad was just 9 years old. My father's birth father drowned in the Feather River trying to save a couple of women. And he did, but he couldn't save himself. So when my dad was 9 years old, I think he was more like when he was about 12, my grandmother remarried. And my grandpa Sweeney was not my step-grandpa, he was my grandpa. And older my dad got, he would say things and do things, and I'm like, man, you remind me so much of Grandpa. They weren't even related. Even Jesus goes to God in prayer for guidance. What does that say about us? Jesus is going to him going, show me the way here. Do you think you got it all figured out? Sometimes I feel like we're my little nephew, and you just let him go. And that's how he's been all weekend. But he has no idea where he's going. If you ask him where he's going, he's just going to stare at you like crazy. I think that's my learning experience. He looks at me like I'm crazy. But sometimes that's how some of us are. We just want to go. We don't know where we're going, but we just want to go. And God's like, no, I've given you structure. I need you to go here. I need you to be here. I judged parents that put their kids on leashes until I had one that needed one, right? Because kids need guidance. You get to a place like Disneyland where they cram 40 million people in this, an acre of land. Yeah, you're like, okay, I need a leash, right? Because as children, we constantly are needing guidance. We see the big flashy thing in front of us and we want to run to it, but there's so many dangers between here and that flashy place. And it doesn't change when you get older. You think that what you need are all these certain amounts of success, and what God just wants you to be is present. Man. Yeah, I'll be present as soon as I get this house, as soon as I get this status, as soon as I make it to this point in my career, as soon as I get this level of education. And then I will be present. And then as you think life has been put on pause until you achieve those things, life continues moving. And your children get older and they grow without you. And you think, what happened? Loving is not always just giving something, it's sometimes just being there. It's just being present. When my dad died, my other dad over here was one of the first to call. And he didn't have the magic words. He didn't make him come back to life. Shame on him, right? Unbelievable. But he was present. That's what you need. We as children of God. Well, Alan didn't have magic words either. Nor did Sister Daughter. Shame on her. But they were present. I know what this is like. This is going to hurt. That's what love is like. You can hand me a check and tell me sorry about your dad. I hope this helps. And that means a lot. This church did that for us. Helped us get back and forth without any worry or financial burden on us. And as much as that meant to us, the availability of people just being there, that was the love. And that love means a lot because it's an imitation of the Father. When I pray to God, I don't walk out and I pick off a $100 bill off the tree out front. It doesn't work that way. I wish it did. I'd water that sucker every day. That's not how it works. But every time I go to him, he is present. He is available. So when we love, we need to understand why. I don't care for the parenting, and maybe I'll eat my words when I'm older, but I don't like the kind of parenting that's just says, because I said so. Because I think you want your kids to learn something, tell them why you shouldn't grab the burner, because it's hot and will burn you. But just because I said so, well, sometimes that authority isn't enough. So why should I love my enemy? Because I said so. Well, We love for Jesus, number one. The Lord's churches have become evangelical bomb shelters. We find out that the end is near, so we all gather around, we get all the people that we like and we love, and we all hang out here and we go, whew! We've avoided that catastrophe. And it sickens me when there are fires in LA and somebody says, well, were any of our churches affected? And then the next answer is no, and they go, oh, thank God. And then that ends the conversation. What? As if there's nothing that needs to be done then because a missionary Baptist church didn't burn to the ground. Shame on us. We love for Jesus. And that love does not mean that we get to shelter in place. We bring in the people we like and we hide out the people that we don't, and the world goes right to hell, and we just, quite frankly, don't care. Jesus took worse for us. The cross. And so many of us are just afraid of what? Confrontation, rejection. What if you're afraid of it? Because I highly doubt if you invited your neighbor to church, they would, whip out a cat of nine tails until you get off your property. If you do, you'd probably live, I don't know, in Berkeley somewhere, maybe not here. I highly doubt that's going to happen to you. Now, if it does happen to you, don't sue me. But we love not only for Jesus, but we love for our enemies' sake. I'm going to give you an Abraham Lincoln quote, because that's how intelligent this sermon is today. I get rid of my enemies by making them my friends. We can build a bridge and win our enemies to Christ, but that has to be a choice. And third, we love for our own sake. When we love our enemies, they no longer control our life. Do you realize how many of you are controlled by the very enemy you swear to hate? We get so angry at the way people treat us that they live rent-free in our minds. And this creates malice and anger. And Christ wants you to be in the battlefield, not to create more war, but to end it with his gospel message. He doesn't want you out there going, yeah, God hates everything you guys are doing. But he wants you out there saying, there is redemption for all those who call upon his name. When we love, we grow in our Christian faith. Some people, let's face it, are hard to love. We all know them. A name just immediately popped in your head when I said it. It's okay. I'm not judging you. A name's in my head right now. I won't say it out loud because some of you know who they are. I'm not going to say it. Yeah, I know. Now you're really like, who's he talking about? But more importantly, who are you thinking about? Because some people are hard to love. And there are some people, even in our Christian faith, that if it weren't for our Christian faith, we'd have nothing in common. And that's okay. I'm not saying you got to go out and be best friends with everybody. However, it does my heart good to hear when there's like 3 random ladies in the church that got together for coffee last week that have nothing in common other than the love of Christ. But man, when we love, we grow for ourselves, and some people, yes, are hard to love, but when we live love and not just feel it, change can happen. Problem is, we spend so much time allowing it, and at times empowering people to make poor decisions or treat us poorly because we're afraid of confrontation. We're afraid of how they're going to feel. And so Jesus loved the Pharisees. He died for them just like he died for you. But he also called them out on their destructive behavior. He didn't sit back and go, well, the Pharisees are hypocrites. They are, what do you call them, vile snakes? They are that, but I don't want to say that to them because if I do, they may not come to my next sermon. His own brother didn't believe in him. And we don't have record conversation of that. But I highly doubt Jesus sat back and went, yeah, I know my brother James doesn't believe that I am the Christ. But if I talk to him about me some more, he's probably going to get angry, and I don't want to lose my brother. He's my brother after all. I have to have my brother. He's family. Don't you understand? Family is family. You start sounding like Vin Diesel and Fast and Furious. You've got to understand at the end of the day, if family truly is family and family is truly important to you, the truth is the most important thing that you can bring them. You should love your enemy because in doing so, you show that he has truly changed you. When I see some children of God that are quick to be angry at people's sin, I'm wondering, what's that like for you? Because when I ask you, are you a Christian, I'm not asking you about how you feel about Jesus. I'm asking you, has he changed your life? I'm not asking you to give me some stats about Christ. Yeah, you walked on the water, you healed the sick. Those are all stats. I can name you stats about Michael Jordan, but that doesn't mean that I know him on a personal level. I don't know what he likes having for breakfast. Maybe Wheaties. I think he was on a box of those in the 90s. But I don't know who he is. He's just a man to me. And so for some of us, we say, are you a Christian? Yeah, I'm a Christian. What does that mean to you, though? Does that mean that you just, I believe that he loves me and he loves all of us? But does that do anything? Has it done anything in your life? It's great that you acknowledge he exists. That's a start. I don't want to shame that. But your acknowledgement isn't the most important part of that phrase. His existence is. To acknowledge that he exists is wonderful, but to know that he exists in your heart is a completely different matter. What you do with the name of Jesus matters. Not only changes your life, but it has the power to change your family's life. Because you understand, when you are a peacekeeper or a peacemaker, and you live in a bunch of warmongering family members, if you're the peacemaker and you create peace in the home, you've now changed your home for the better. You want your children, your spouse, your friend to know Christ, you need to start living like he has saved yours. If you're not living like he saved yours and he's done something in your life, why in the world would anybody want what you have? You want your coworker, your neighbor, your family member to love you. Start by loving them first. Yeah, I know. We all want things in relationships. We all desire to have a relationship go a certain way, but until we begin to fulfill the needs of others, we are never going to operate correctly. Sometimes it takes us being the bigger person to take the first step. And if they don't take the step with you, you keep loving them anyway. In closing, everybody's favorite line. We can't help having enemies. But you don't have to be enemies. You're going to have them. That's just like saying, everybody in my life likes me. Well, that's a little delusional. Hate to say it, I'm sure you're a likable person and everybody loves you, but when it comes down to it, there's probably at least one or two people that don't like you. Jesus laid down his life for us. But he also laid his life down for his enemies. And if you really know the scripture, those two are one and the same. Because when Jesus laid his life down for his enemy was us. We stood in that crowd just like anybody else 2,000 years ago. He would have done the same thing and cried, crucify him. Everything he asks us to do, Jesus already did. Doesn't that drive you nuts? When you were a kid, your dad was like, hey, I don't see straight A's on this report card. And he ripped you a new one for it. And you weren't smart enough as a kid to ask. Then you got older and you went, hey, Dad, what grade did you get in chemistry? Oh, I didn't take chemistry, son. I left school in the 6th grade. You're like, what the? Why was I supposed to get straight A's? Right? I know my parents are old. Some of you are like, what are you talking about? My parents are PhDs. But I think that, we have an expectation on our children sometimes, and yet we couldn't even fulfill it ourselves. But the challenge gets all the more daunting when you say, hey, if I can do it, you can. If I can make something of myself, you can. If I can get myself to find myself out there in this world, I can find myself to be of use and change my little world that I'm in. If I can do it, you can. And not all of us have to stand at pulpits to change the world. You can change the world right where you're at, whatever job you're in, whatever retail, if you're in construction, it doesn't matter. You can change the world how you treat your enemies. My father-in-law has horror stories working retail. He's got some needy customers. That's what happens when you sell what he sells. But it drives those people nuts when he loves them in return. Because they don't know what to do with it. And that's how we're supposed to treat others. He gets paid to do it. Doesn't make it easy, though. We need to love our enemies. Not because that's a good idea, not because it sounds like a great concept, but because your Father in heaven does. And Jesus already proved you can do it because he did. I do a lot of things just like my dad, because he's my dad. I wasn't sure if I had one long name or two names, because my dad constantly called me Zachary Charles. That was all I heard all my childhood. It was that name. And so we simplified it to Zach with 3 letters because I couldn't write that many words. And I always thought that was so embarrassing as a kid. You know, Zachary Charles, get in the car. I'm like, oh, I'm 14, right? And our daughter at 3 years old, I think out of 100 times I call her name, maybe once it's just Aurora. It's always Aurora Joy, and it's in that voice, and I get so embarrassed. We were like Disney the other day, she started crying. I was like, no, right now. And I was like, I was so my dad. And so we will do a lot of things like our parents. How many things am I doing today that are a lot like God? Am I loving the way he loves? Am I patient? Am I kind? Am I honest? Do I forgive? Love never fails. I know, that's so corny, but it's true. When did someone truly love you and you were worse for it? I can't stand it. Every time I see Sister Patty, she wants a hug. Right? Are you worse for it? Are you worse somebody offered to help you? When did you hate or dislike someone and were better for it? Oh, it feels so good to judge Brother Allen. You're not better for it. You're actually exhausted. There's times where I vent and I feel better for it. But then there's times where I know I'm just talking smack and I get done and I'm like, I feel like I need to lay down. Because that isn't healthy. Why? Because it goes right along this line. Am I loving my enemy when I hug their neck and then when I walk away with that person's an idiot? No. That's exhausting. And so I hope this message is some encouragement to you this morning, because I want you to give it a shot. That person that you don't want me to mention, try loving them this week. The people in your home that you resent, that you wish would just get out, try loving them this week. It's hard. Some of us kind of chuckle at that, but all of us have got some roommates right now. Some of them are blood, and that's the only reason why they're still in that house. But others that aren't blood, you really want them out, right? Those are the worst ones. I need that person out now, right? Try loving them this week. Like, I've been loved out. Try loving them this week. You know what I mean? Try loving them this week. Try letting go and letting God. Try allowing God to allow you to give the filter to see them the way he sees them. Sometimes we want people to change and then we say nothing to them in hopes that any correction is ever made. And God has put you in their life, in their home, for you to influence them to say, listen, I see this behavior over and over and it's breaking my heart because I feel like it's taking you down a road that isn't good for you. Who else is going to tell them that? The teller at the supermarket? I noticed that you ordered a lot of zucchini today. I need to talk to you about that. No, they're not going to have that conversation with them the way you could effectively. And so I pray that you take this message to heart today. I pray that you walk and talk more like your Father, because there's nothing wrong with that. Let's stand together and we'll be dismissed. I want to thank everybody that was here, including my family today.